Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. जय श्री कृष्णा चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा महामंत्र की जय। शिला प्रभुपाद की जय। Thank you everyone for joining this Friday satsang. So we'll have our kirtan party highlighted, spotlight for everyone. Okay, here. Thank you. Yes, please start.
Namoyam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Shamite Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama
Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Rama
Rama
Rama,
Rama,
Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय, शिला प्रभुपाद की जय, कीर्तन किट्स की जय. Wonderful. Hari Hari Bol.
Very nice. He's also enjoying.
Hare Krishna, Ajit Krishna Prabhu, Dandavad Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dhan Pranam, Gurish Prabhupada. Jai.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavad Pranams, All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, all
Hare
glories to
Krishna.
Prabhupada.
Jai Prabhupada, Dhan Pranam Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Shri Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Sri Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Okay, Prabhuji, thank you so much for the wonderful Kirtan. Once again, kids' Kirtan is always so wonderful, very, very inspiring and very pleasing. So I think let's move to the next part of the program with recap from last time. Should we do that, Muktasanga Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. So anyone wants to volunteer? No?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Mataji, no problem.
Humble pranam, glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Prabhupada.
So which verse did we do last time?
So last time we had done
15.
14, 15.
I can
Yeah.
talk.
14,
15.
15.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did text 13, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I
No,
just
14.
stepped away.
Yeah, we had done 14, 15.
Yes.
We mainly did 13 and then we touched 14.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Can you recap, Mataji?
Yeah, sure, Prabhuji. I think the way we connected in text 12, uh, like demigods provide us all the necessities, and if we don't offer to them, then we become thieves. And then in connecting to that, text 13, like Krishna is saying, without offering to Krishna, if we eat, then we are just eating sin, but it's nothing but like again we are thieves. And Prabhuji gave a good example wherein, like, if a thief, if they find gold and then if the government or anyone asks them, where did you get this? And then if he doesn't tell the source, then it's implied that it's a thief. So we all need to know that the source is coming from Krishna. And then another point is by offering prasadam, I'm sorry, by offering bhoga and having prasadam, that is the easiest way of the sacrifice after chanting, because Krishna has made it so easy that because nobody would be there who would not love to eat. So it's very easy that you offer to me and then you take it. So that way you get blessed. That's also a kind of egna. And then you told us that the 12 and 13, mainly the summary is that um, the benefit of the sacrifice, why do we do, and then purpose of the sacrifice. I made another note, the benefit of the sacrifice and the power of performing sacrifice. And then we are developing understanding that Krishna is the one who is actually to be pleased. Like if Krishna is pleased, demigods are also pleased. And then you gave us the example of Bali Maharaj. So he did the sacrifice and there was a small flaw. So then keeping all that aside, this sacrifice is much easier, much easy where offer prasadam. And then also, um, you explained the Brahma Samhita reference wherein he can eat by eating, just by eating, because anyone can argue how can he eat, then we are thinking in our lowest material level, in our condition, if we cannot eat, we think nobody can eat. But if we think on Krishna's level, he's so transcendental that he can eat just by looking, and then he can just make any plate of prasad for anyone. So that was the point, like about, and then why we say the prayers, Mahaprasad Govinde, because we are praying that to have control on the tongue, um, and also we realize that we're constantly reminding that it's Krishna whom we are offering, and we remember that. That's and he's the one who created the prasadam basically. And the more we understand, then we get more convinced. And then you gave us the Srimad Bhagavatam reference, first canto, chapter 3 and 12, which is about the Agna incarnation. So those are the things that I have remembered, Prabhuji.
Very nice, Mataji. Thank you so much. You covered most of the points I think that we had discussed in the class the other day.
Sure.
Thank you for that again, Mataji. Anybody else to add anything?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Krishna,
So when we're offering the prasadam, I had a question last week. I was confused about when we are offering everything to Krishna, then why do we bother also give respects to demigods or offer some special prayers to them? So that was there. You were explaining something to me, but I guess as long as we are offering everything to Krishna, so all the other demigods are satisfied. So we get to purified consciousness by eating prasadam. Slowly our sins are cleansed. So main thing is eating prasadam and keeping the company of the devotees and listening to Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, all that. That will purify and cleanse our heart so that we may approach Krishna in a much better way, than unpurified consciousness.
Right. That's by offering to Krishna, all the demigods are satisfied. And we had discussed the example of Durvas Muni and how Krishna came and saved the Pandavas by making Durvas Muni and his followers feel like they had eaten a sumptuous meal when Krishna just ate one grain of rice. So, satisfying Krishna is the bottom line. And we had discussed that we owe to the demigods just so that we can understand exactly how Krishna is working, how this material nature is working, how Krishna is giving us various necessities of life through the demigods. But eventually it is coming from Krishna. So that's why the Shastra explains that the most intelligent person is he who understands this connection, and then so finally he or she surrenders to Krishna and tries to please Krishna. So thank you, Mother.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to add anything to that? Okay, if not, then we'll continue with the reading. So basically, we had gone through 15, right? Or 14? 15, okay. So today we can start with 16 then?
Prabhuji, we read
15.
15.
We went through 14. We need to start 15, I guess.
Okay, 15, okay. Okay, so I think let's start the reading of 15 then we can discuss that nicely.
Yeah, okay, bro. Rachna Mataji is here?
Yes, Prabhuji, she's here. So 15, right, Prabhuji?
Yes, Mother.
Karma Brahmodbhavam Vidhi.
Brahmaskara samudbhavam.
Brahmachagra samudbhavam.
Sarvagatam Brahma.
Tasmat sarvagatam Brahma.
Nitya yagne pratishtitam.
Nityam yagne pratishtitam.
Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, all the pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice.
Hare Krishna.
Brinda, you want to do?
Which text?
16.
16.
Okay. Evam pravartitam chakram.
Evam pavartitam chakram.
Nanu vartayati yaha.
Nanu vartayati.
Aghayorindriya ramo. Mogham partha sajivati.
Mogham partha sajivati.
My dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice thus established by the Vedas certainly leads a life full of sin. Living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Okay.
Step 17.
Ram Prabhu, your kids are there? Mukund Prabhu?
Prabhuji, can Mukund read?
Yes, Mukund Prabhu.
Okay, Prabhuji. 17, right, Prabhuji? Okay, please.
Yes.
Yes, 17.
Yastvatmartir syad.
Yastvatmartirivasya
Atmatriptascha manavah.
atmatriptascha manavah
Atmanyeva cha santustas.
atmaniyeva cha santustas
Tasya karyam na vidyate.
tasya karyam na vidyate.
Translation. But for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of self, and who is satisfied in the self, fully satiated, for him there is no duty. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So again, we'll repeat from 15. So,
Yes.
Narasimha Prabhu.
Yes. Karma brahmodbhavam vidhi.
Karma
Karma
Brahmottamam Vidhi.
brahmodbhavam vidhi
Brahmakshara samudbhavam.
Brahmakshara
brahmasara
Samudbhavam.
samudbhavam
Tasmat sarvagatam brahma.
Tasmat
tasmat
Sarvagatam
sarvagatam
Brahma
brahma
Nityam yagye pratishtitam.
Nityam
Nityam
Yajne
nityam
yagye
yajne
pratishtitam.
pratishtitam.
Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. 16. Vathala Mataji.
Yes, Prabhu. Evam pravartitam chakram
Evam
Evam
pravartitam
pravartitam
chakram
chakram
nanu vartayati yaha
nanu vartayanaha
aghayor indriya ramo
aghayurindriyaramo
Agayurindriyaramo
mogam partha sajivati.
mogam partha sajivati.
Jivati.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. My dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice, thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads life full of sin. Living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain. Hare Krishna, thank you.
17. Ramshyam Prabhu.
Yeah, Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yastav atma ratir ev syad.
Yastva
Atma
Yasyat.
Atma triptascha manavaha.
Atma triptascha manava
manava
Atmaiva cha santustas.
Atmaniva
Atmaniva
cha
santustas
santustas
Tasya karya na vidyate.
tasya
tasya
karyam
karyam na vidyate.
And the translation and purport by His Divine Grace Rachana Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. But for the one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of the self-realization, and who is satisfied in the self only, fully satiated, for him there is no duty. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
All right, Prabhu, I think we'll move ahead with the discussion then, unless somebody else wants to read it.
So there is a new person, Avik Bishwas. May I know who is this?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, this is Manju Mataji and Avik is moved into the temple.
Is it Manju Mataji?
Yes.
Hare Krishna Manju Mataji. Thank you for joining. Okay, Prabhu.
Okay, so we just move ahead with the invocation prayers and then we can do the discussion. Om Agyan Timrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmetam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Namaskute Tapta Kanchana Gaura Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute
Pranamami Hari
Vancha Kalpatruvascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar
Shivasati Gaura
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama
Hare Rama,
Rama Rama
Rama
Hare
Rama, Hare Hare.
So once again, text 15, the Lord says, Karma Brahmodbhavam Vidhi Brahmakshara Samudbhavam Tasmat Sarvagatam Brahma Nityam Yagne Pratishtitam. Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. So here Krishna is recommending to us why we should perform sacrifices. And again, the thing to keep in mind is that devotees probably already understand the final conclusion that Krishna is going to come to, which is that basically we should pray to Krishna and serve Krishna. But Krishna is building this up to that point. And over here, he's recommending regulative activities as prescribed in the Vedas. This is for the benefit of those who are yet not on the platform of understanding that devotional service is what needs to be performed. So for them, Krishna is saying that better than just acting whimsically, doing whatever you want, instead of doing that, it is better to follow regulative activities as prescribed in the Vedas. And so somebody might ask, why should I follow what is prescribed in the Vedas? Why can't I just do what my common sense tells me is the right thing to do? Or if I'm a law-abiding citizen, I'm following the laws of the state. What's wrong with that? And so there's nothing wrong with following the laws of the state. But just like if we follow the laws of the state, we are considered law-abiding citizens and we are not punished by the law. Similarly, higher than the law of the state, higher than the man-made laws that we abide by, are laws that are made by the Supreme Lord. And those laws apply to the entire creation. And so if we violate those laws, we will be punished. Now, Prabhupada also explains this very clearly, and he says that ignorance of the laws of laws of God, the laws of nature or laws of scripture, whatever you want to call them, they are basically laws of God, Ignorance of the laws of God is no excuse. We cannot say that, oh, I wasn't aware of this law, so I should not get punished. Krishna has given us the laws in the scriptures. So it is up to us. The responsibility is ours to familiarize ourselves with the laws and follow those. And if we don't, then we are punished. So that's why Krishna is saying here that instead of acting in an unregulated manner, where you could incur sin or where you will incur sin, if you follow the regulative activities as prescribed in the Vedas, then you will be safe. Because activities that are performed without regard to what the Vedas say is called vikarma. It's explained, the purport here, Prabhupada explains that is vikarma. And vikarma always leads to sinful reactions. And therefore, Krishna says, to protect you from sinful reactions, I have given the Vedas such that whatever our propensities are, and living entities, our greatest propensity is to enjoy the fruits of material nature, enjoy the resources of material nature. And Krishna says, if you try to enjoy those without understanding that I am the one who's providing them, and you just go and whimsically try to exploit what is available in nature just for a simple sense gratification, then you get a sinful reaction. But if you follow the regulative or the directions given in the scriptures and then perform activities, then you are saved from vikarma, you are saved from reactions. Now, Krishna says here, the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just like we had discussed last time, this verse from Brahma Samhita, which said, Anganiyasya sakalendriya vittimanti, that the Lord's senses are interchangeable. He can perform any function uh, he can perform any function of one sense with another sense, meaning he can see through his ears or he can hear through his eyes and things like that. Similarly, Krishna can speak simply through his breathing. The Vedas were spoken by him simply through his breathing. Now, this is the inconceivable and absolute nature of the Supreme Lord, but these are facts. And so we, with faith, we accept them. Just because we are incapable of it doesn't mean that Krishna is not capable of it. So if somebody says, how can that be? How can God just give the Vedas or speak the Vedas through his breathing? Well, you and I cannot, doesn't mean that he cannot. And if he's saying in the scripture that this is how it's done, we accept it as the truth. And then in text 16, Krishna goes on to say that, my dear Arjun, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice, thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads a life full of sin. Living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain. So this is very important. Krishna says, living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain. That means their human life is wasted. Having gotten a human birth, the idea is to perform sacrifice. In Bhagavatam, we hear about how Rishabdev instructed his 100 sons. He said, Tapo divyam putraka, meaning this human life is meant to perform tapasya. Brahmaji, when he found himself right at the beginning of creation, seated on this lotus flower, and there was no creation, there was nothing around him, and he didn't know his own source, where he came from. And then he heard the word tapa. And so he performed sacrifices. And when he performed sacrifice and meditation, the Lord revealed to him within his heart the entire knowledge by which he could conduct the creation. So such is the power of tapasya, because it is directly given by the Supreme Lord. So in text 16, we find the full explanation of this yoga ladder. or how one moves up in the yoga ladder all the way up to Bhakti Yoga. Because Krishna says, my dear Arjun, one who does not follow human life, the cycle of sacrifice established by the Vedas certainly leads a life full of sin. So what happens is, you think about it, a person who is completely atheistic performs whatever he or she desires and just keeps incurring sin. And as a result of those sins, they take birth in lower life forms. A human being is not meant to just perform activities whimsically. So the Vedas give us exact directions on how to perform activities. So if somebody wants to, for example, if they, let's say you have farmers. Farmers produce grains. Grains depend on rains for growth. And so the farmers particularly pray to Lord Indra for rains. If there are plentiful rains, they get a good harvest, and therefore they are sustained. And not only they are sustained, all of mankind is sustained, because if there's plenty of rain, there's good harvest, everybody has enough food. In fact, in the Govardhan Leela that we are all familiar with, basically Nand Maharaj and the cowherd men were going to perform sacrifices to Indradev for producing rains. And then Krishna then intervened and said, because Krishna himself was there, he said, why are you performing sacrifices to Indradev? Just worship Govardhan Hill. Because Govardhan Hill was actually a manifestation of Krishna. So in other words, Krishna instructed them to pray to him. And we know how that story unfolded. But for someone who's not on that high devotional platform, Krishna says they should perform sacrifices. So if the farmers who are not on a devotional platform perform sacrifices, Indradev is pleased. Indradev then provides rains. When rains, now Indradev also provides rains under the sanction of Krishna, not on his own. He gets his power from Krishna. So when he provides rains, people get plentiful harvest and they are happy. So this way, an atheistic person develops faith in the recommended sacrifices. Similarly, there are sacrifices for obtaining wealth. Now, who doesn't want more wealth? That's a very common requirement. So when somebody who's otherwise atheistic follows the sacrifices and gets some wealth, he develops faith. But what happens is, even though a person may get some rewards from performing sacrifices, first, those rewards are temporary, meaning they don't last forever. If a person gets some wealth, that wealth will last for some time, or it's a certain amount of wealth, but as life progresses, he or she will run into a situation where they will need more of it. So gradually a person comes to realize that despite all the sacrifices that I may perform to fulfill my needs, the problems in this material world are so many that it is impossible to adequately preempt all those problems by fully performing sacrifices beforehand. In other words, how do you prevent the miseries of Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, birth, death, old age, disease? You can perform any number of sacrifices, but still a person has to die, still a person has to get old, still they get disease. So when a person reaches this kind of level of thinking, he or she realizes that, okay, by performing sacrifices, I can fulfill some of my material needs, but I still cannot get rid of all of these problems like birth, death, old age, disease. So then an inquiry starts happening in their mind. They go through this inquiry process. So they approach the priests, the pandits who recommended the sacrifices, who performed the sacrifices, asking for how can we possibly end these problems of life. And the priests say, you cannot, if while you're in this material world, these problems are there, but there is a higher standard of living in Swarglok. So the person says, okay, then can I go there? He says, yes, you perform the following sacrifices, you can go to Swarglok. This is also described in the Vedas. But over time, the person realizes, okay, I may change my standard of living from living in this world to going to a higher standard by living in, say, Swarglok or the higher planets. But even there is death. Even there are challenges. The demigods living in the higher planets, including Indradev, they are also fighting against invaders and attackers like the Asuras. There are problems there also. But this understanding comes to a person by first of all stopping, by not being an atheist, following the following the principles of scripture, of the Vedas, performing sacrifices. And that's how they slowly start coming to this platform of understanding that there is more to life than just fulfilling your material requirements. So the first section, again, talking about this yoga ladder, the lowest section is the Karm Kand section, where the person performs activities just to satisfy their desires, and then they take shelter of the Vedas in terms of how to perform these sacrifices so that their life can be plentiful. They can have enough to survive nicely. So that's Karma Kand. When they realize that Karma Kand is only fulfilling some of my needs in this life, I need to do something higher, then that takes you up to Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga means that the person now understands that these sacrifices and things like that are only going to fulfill my material needs. But what about spiritual life? When that inquiry comes in, then the person is on the platform of Karma Yoga. And then the person starts understanding that, oh, whether I live in this planet or I go up to the heavenly planets, these problems of birth, death, old age, disease will still be there. So how can I get out of this entanglement of material existence? And that's when the yoga part starts. So that's when a person starts thinking as a karma yogi. He's still performing activity, he's still performing karma, his activities are not fully purified, but he also wants to go to the spiritual world. So as a karma yogi, a person initially is sakam karma yogi, meaning performing activities for results out of the desires. He has desires, sakam, and he's performing activities to fulfill his desires. So he's a sakam karma yogi. Eventually, through following the Vedic principles, a person comes to the platform of nishkam karma yoga, where he says, okay, I don't want these results. What I want is, I want to go to the spiritual world. So then he becomes a nishkam karma yogi. But so all of that is covered through text 16. Now, when a person becomes nishkam karma yogi, he starts to think that, okay, I don't have any material desires. I don't want any elevation to heavenly planets. I want to perform bhakti to Krishna. So then the person may think, then I have no need to perform any of these activities or sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas. And in response to that, Krishna says in 17 that, but for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of self-realization, and who is satisfied in the self, for him there is no duty. Meaning for him, there is no need to perform sacrifices for material gain. So that is what we've covered through 17. But actually, in text 18 and 19, then Krishna then actually says that you cannot still not perform these sacrifices that are mentioned in the Vedas. So you might ask, but first Krishna is saying there's no need to perform sacrifices, just perform bhakti. But now he's saying again, perform sacrifices. So later on, it will be disclosed as we read through this, and the example of Janak Maharaj is given, that even after one realizes that our goal is bhakti and our goal is spiritual life, simply to set an example for those who are not on the spiritual platform and those who have a tendency to drift towards atheism or just stay stuck on fulfilling material desires, for them, for their benefit, it is important to perform sacrifices or encourage them to perform sacrifices so that through the performance of those sacrifices, they can eventually come up to the platform of Bhakti Yoga. So this whole system of Vedic sacrifices, Vedic rituals has been given to us by Krishna in the Vedas to gradually elevate people to the platform of devotional service. It's a gradual process. The whole thing to understand is it's a gradual process. Nothing happens in 1 minute or 1 second. It takes lifetimes for people to get elevated to the platform devotional service. So for those of us who are already aware of the benefits of devotional service, we have to be extremely thankful and grateful to Krishna for sending his representatives like Srila Prabhupada, who have given us this understanding. So this is what is basically covered here through text 17. It is kind of similar to what we had covered in 12, 13, 14. It's the same theme, but now the theme is going to change starting from 18. So 17, so through 17, this is essentially the bigger, or this is the big picture that is being painted. Let me stop here for a minute in case you have questions or anything like that. Otherwise, we can move forward. We can move further.
Prabhu, I'm curious to know one thing.
Yes, Prabhu.
So we always say Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi. So this is there in this material world, which includes Brahmaloka.
Yeah.
So I've never heard about disease and old age when it comes to Brahmaloka. It's always birth and death. That's all. So it's creation and annihilation. That's all. But I've not heard about diseases. And so what kind of diseases they have?
In higher planets?
Yes, in higher planets. Like we have so many diseases, numerous diseases, but what kind of diseases they will go through?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, I have not seen any description of diseases that are there in the higher planets, but apparently there are, right? Unless they die just in 1 second.
Yeah, that's what I'm so curious
when the time
to know,
comes.
because they will definitely have old age, because it is said Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi, they have to have old age, they have to have diseases and then die. That is a process. So nowhere I've heard that, and old age and disease.
I think what happens is that because of old age, the body does definitely slow down. It becomes weaker. It is not capable of performing the same activities or with the same strength and vigor as one could in the younger age. So even though the standard of life is much higher in the higher planets, I think the level of suffering due to disease is much, much lower. For example, Jambavan, the king of the bears, right? He says many times in his, in Ramayana, he said that when I was young, then I could in one jump take 7 rounds of the planet Earth. But at that time, when they were trying to jump or go to Lanka, Jambavan was unable to do that, and that's how he encouraged Hanuman to do it. Because Jambavan said that in my younger days, I could go around the earth 7 times. Now, he resides in the higher planetary systems now, but still there is the capability probably goes down.
Is that termed as disease?
Possibly, or at least as old age, right? A good question.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I would like to, maybe whether fit or not.
Yes.
Like Indra, always we see that he is always envious, right? So whenever anybody do sacrifice, he thought like his post will be gone and he will disturb. So this is one kind of misery.
Yes.
So it is just subtle misery. It's not gross misery like we are physically getting diseases. So I mean, that being envious, that is also part of misery, because he's troubling, he's suffering overall.
Right.
Yeah,
It's a different kind of suffering.
yeah,
It's a mental suffering, not physical suffering.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Prabhu, can I interrupt?
sure, Mataji.
Prabhu, I thought that they are more like realized souls when you are going up and higher in the planets, and not like the human beings. Our average lifespan is probably 100 years or 110 maybe, with all kinds of things, even though we can be careful with our diets and all that health. But still, we can go on, live up to 110, 120, maybe in Japan and other places. But I was maybe misunderstanding something here. When you go up higher, maybe you have done a lot of sacrifices or a lot of tapas. So your activities are not like a human beings. So am I right or wrong? They don't have to suffer as much as we do.
Yeah, clearly the suffering level is not anywhere close to what we have in this planet. So that's why the standard of living is much higher in the heavenly planets, and that's why the Vedas recommend sacrifices that can be performed, which can elevate us to those planets. Definitely, the standard of living is much higher. The lifespan is longer, fewer miseries. But what we just described, like if Indradev is intention that his post may be taken, so that is adhyatmic. You see, there's adhyatmic, adi bhautik, and adi devik. Three kinds of miseries that we suffer on this planet. But adhyatmic is miseries caused by your own mind, and so that is there even in the higher planets.
Mm.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna and Shyam Prabhu.
Prabhuji, I was just thinking about just the Bhagavad Gita itself and how they are descendants, like they descended from the heavenly planets, like those who were participating in the Mahabharat war, and so they must have faced suffering. So they faced it here, like in some fashion, like, and then they went back to the heavenly planet. So maybe it's like if, or there are some cases where there are curses and. Very advanced souls, they come to earth, and the Lord personally comes to deliver them because they are very dear to him. So maybe that's how it may be related to this. That's all.
Yes, Prabhu. No, that's a good point, because like Jay and Vijay, they were in fact not only out of this material world, they were in Vaikuntha. And so when the Lord wanted to come down to perform his pastimes, he needed some of his associates to come, but he arranged for the Kumars to come there and curse them, and so they came down. Uh, the three births that they had, Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, then Ravan Kumbhakarna, and then Shishupal and Dantavakra. So you're right. I mean, sometimes as a result of curses, and imagine they get cursed to come down to this material world. And we are here, so we can imagine how resistant and how undesirable it is to be in this material world. So Krishna has also given us the process by which we can come out of here and come back to the spiritual world.
Yes, Prabhuji.
So nice questions, nice thoughts. Interesting. Others?
Way you said the connection, um, like first when I was trying to tell the recap, I was like, okay, I know what this 13 and 14 Prabhuji said, but where are we? What context? I had to think for some time. But then the way you said it, like, 13, 14, and then how 15, 16, and then where we are up to, and then what Krishna is like this, then I was like, okay, yes, now I'm on track. So I really liked the way how you made it easy. So I just wanted to share that comment, Prabhuji. So far up to 18. Yeah. No, 17. 17.
Thank you, Madhuri. I'm glad that kind of that, that way those verses are connected makes sense. Because sometimes it's easy. I mean, one gets very confused in how these verses are flowing. So,
Yes.
So basically now 17 onwards, Krishna then starts explaining a slightly different theme, which is basically that even though we may be freed from material desires, and the Vedic injunctions are essentially designed to fulfill our material desires. So even once we are at a point where we are freed from material desires, and we may start to think that, no, now I don't have a need to perform any of these Vedic injunctions, then Krishna explains that there is still a need to perform your prescribed duties. And so from 17 onwards, at least the next 10, 11 verses talk about why it is still important to perform prescribed duties. Actually,
So Prabhu,
17 is...
here I have a question. So when you say
Yes,
prescribed
Prabhu.
duties, right? So
Yes.
Krishna is trying to preach Arjuna to do his duty. At the same
Yeah.
time, he wants basically Arjuna to be self-satiated, and
Yes.
the human life is for self-realization. So especially in the 17th verse, he says that who is satisfied in the self, for him there is no duty.
Right.
But he says, do your duty. So
Right.
little contradictory there, because
Mhm.
on one side he says, do your duty.
Mm.
The other side
Yeah.
is there, if you become a self-realized, you don't have to do any duty.
Yeah.
And he wants Arjuna to be self-realized soul, with all this knowledge is imparting on him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then how do you interpret that? Don't do your duty or do
So,
your duty?
yeah. So that's now starting verse 17 for the next about 10, 11 verses. Krishna answers this question that you have, this contradiction that you're talking about, that on one hand, Krishna wants Arjun to be self-satisfied and not have material desires. And on the other hand, he's saying that, but you should still perform your prescribed duties as described in the Vedas. So the reason Krishna wants those duties to be performed is explained in the following verses. So, but just to satisfy the curiosity a little bit, the answer to that essentially is that uh, the leaders of society, and Krishna gives the example of Janak Maharaj, who is one of the 12 Mahajans. He says, as they act, so others will follow. And so even though Arjun or Janak Maharaj had reached the stage where they didn't need the purification that happens through the performance of the Vedic principles, for the benefit of those who they were governing and for the benefit of the general population, it is important for them to set these examples. Otherwise, what happens is people say, oh, if the leader is not doing sacrifices, if the king is not doing it, why is he telling us to do it? Even though they had reached the stage of self-realization. So just to teach the common people in general, Krishna recommends the performance of these sacrifices. But for us devotees in today's time, because we don't have the capacity to perform all these sacrifices that are mentioned in the Vedas, Krishna has very kindly appeared as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and given us a simplified and practical method for achieving the same results that we would achieve from performing all the Vedic rules and regulations. simply by hearing and chanting. So even though the 9 processes of devotional service were in the Bhagavatam or come from the Bhagavatam, Mahaprabhu gave us a method that is possible for people in Kali Yuga, where the lifespan is only 100 years, and which can be performed like we discussed, sthaner sthita. You stay in your current position. You don't have to change your current position, don't have to change your profession or anything. Yet you can perform you can perform Sankirtan Yajna, which gives the same benefits as having performed all these Vedic sacrifices. Does that answer your question, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. I mean, partly, but eventually when we go through verses, I think will be more detail.
Right,
Prabhu,
exactly. We get into more detail. This is just a gist of what is
Correct.
of what is coming. It's actually verse 20 where King Janak is mentioned. So we're almost there.
Prabhu, people who have not read at all and they are just trying to read this chapter or something, they may really get confused, like Mukta Sangha Prabhu says, because they will think, why is this contradictory statements given here? One time Lord Krishna says you do, and then other times he says you don't do. Or what is it, what role do I play, and why is he confusing me? Because I mean, as a commoner, they may get, even when I'm reading, sometimes I get a lot of questions, I get confused too. So
that's why actually it's very important to keep the continuation going. When we read but the thing is, there are so many verses now. We, given our limitation and time, etc., we cannot cover all of them in one shot so that we have the full continuous thread, But that's why I'm just giving a preview of what's coming so that the confusion doesn't stay in the mind. Like in text 21, that's a very famous word, yad yad achara shrestha acharati shrestha.
Sayat Pramanam Kurute Lok.
Yeah, tatad evetaro jana.
Sayat
So that whatever action a great man perform, common men follow. So Mataji, just keep in mind that actually there is no contradiction in what Krishna is saying. He is giving
I think we lost for a minute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're back.
Now can you hear me, Prabhu?
Yes, we
okay. Till where did you hear, Prabhuji? What was the last thing?
No, you were reciting the sloka. Yadyad acharasti shrestha tatateve tarojana.
Okay. So that is like verse 21. And so what I was saying was to Mataji to avoid any confusion, Mataji, or anybody for that matter. The thing to remember is that Krishna is describing a few different things. He's giving a few options. And these options are tailored towards people at different levels of spiritual progress. So for a complete novice, for somebody who has very little understanding of spiritual life, who in fact is probably atheist, who doesn't even believe in God, for them Krishna is saying, no, you please start at least doing a few of these Vedic sacrifices. And so that they can see the benefit of these sacrifices, and then they will develop faith. See, like our nectar of instruction also says, Adau Shraddha
Sadhu Sangha.
Adau Shraddha tada Sadhu Sangha tada Anartha Nivritti Syat.
Bhajana Kriya.
So the first So the first step is Adho Shraddha. First is that there should be a little bit of faith. And if there's a little bit of faith, then Sadhu Sangha comes. Then Kriya, then Anartha Nivritti Syat. But if there is no faith, so let alone Sangha Prabhu's frozen on my screen.
Yeah, actually internet is a issue.
Oh, can you hear me, Prabhu?
Yes, we can hear you. Internet is a problem because it's not your internet, it's my internet.
Oh. Okay, anyways. So any confusion, different options, options, these are prescriptions being given depending. So for somebody who has, we have to take to devotional service, Krishna is saying, okay, then no need to perform these Vedic sacrifices because you've already understood what is the purpose of the sacrifices. But for one who doesn't have that level and who in fact may not even have much faith in God or principles of religion, for them Krishna says, well, at least you start following what the Vedic regulations are saying. Otherwise, you will lead life in a whimsical manner and you'll just keep performing sinful activities all the time. And you'll just degrade yourself from human birth. You'll get into an animal birth in your next life. So for them, performing these Vedic sacrifice and all is important. So does that help kind of clarify a little bit, Madhuri? That hopefully reduces the confusion.
Yes. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Okay, Madhuri.
Sorry, Prabhu, there is some issues with my internet today.
Oh, not a problem. No problem. We are dependent on technology. Technology is never perfect. I think all these will become even more clear as we progress more through these next 10 verses or so.
Yeah, that's good, Prabhu. I think we are good. No one has any questions.
All right, Prabhuji, Mataji. Yeah.
Okay, Prabhu. Yeah, so
I think we're all good.
We're all good.
All right, Prabhuji, Mataji.
Yeah. So
thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you all very much, Mataji.
Thank you so much.
Vanchakapatubhyascha krupasindubhyo
Panchakapatu
pavanebhyo vaishvanebhyo.
Namo Namo.
Ajit Krishna Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Jai.
Very nice.
Jai.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Jai.
Jai. Jai.